to this, because so much of the season of Lent, out of that season, Jesus went into that season knowing that he was God's son and he was dearly loved. And so much of the issue of sexuality goes back to identity, and that's the part that I really want to drill down on as we get into this today. But before I get too carried away, I want to thank you all with gifts for coming out today. So I don't know how I'm going to do this, but let me start off with one of my favorite reads, Victory Over Darkness, Neil Anderson, talking about identity. If you are looking for a book that is packed full of just who God says you are, which the more you understand this yourself, the more that you can give that to your students, Victory Over Darkness. I want to give this to the parent of the newest teenager. Your teen, you have a student that just became a teenager. Yeah? When? Can you beat it? Oh, all right. Well, hey, let me give you this. All right. So we run this back to you. Wait, you?
Yeah.
Oh,
February, yes.
there we go. Okay. Next one, Origins. If you ladies were at the last women's conference we had, Linda Godsey wrote Origins. One of the things I'm going to be talking about is generational blessings and curses. And this book is huge. I can't emphasize enough how insightful it is to breaking generational curses, but also passing on generational blessings. I want to give this one to the biggest family. You have the most kids in here. Anybody have more than 6? If I had Jay here, he would win. But we got 5? 5, okay. All right. Shane, I know you have this one, so I'm going back, all the way back. Who is that? I don't know. Well. Oh, cool. Yeah. All right, here you go. There we go. All right. Origins. That's a good one. I think the next one up for grabs is Pastor James Living Free. And I think I want to give this one to the parent that has the most teens right now. Has the most kids that are teens. You have 3 right now. Anybody have them 3? You got 3? Yeah? Okay. All right. I don't know. You have the book? You want it? All right, there we go. Good. I didn't expect a tie on the spot. Okay. Anybody have a newborn? Coffee mug? Anybody with a newborn right now? No? Youngest kid? 4? Anybody beat 4? Oh, Lauren again. We can't have. All right, I'm going to give this to ourselves because Abby and I actually win. Who wants a coffee mug? All right, there we go. All right, there we go. And then who wants a Battle Creek Coffee Equals Freedom shirt? It's going to somebody. There we go. All right. Excellent. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for investing in your students' lives. So here's the deal. Why are we talking about sex and sexuality? Let me give you a quick synopsis of why I'm so passionate about this topic. I grew up in the church, so growing up in the church, I knew a lot about God, but I didn't understand what a relationship with Him was, and I didn't understand that living with Christ was about far more than behaviors. I had some things happen to me and experienced some things early on in my life that significantly affected me for years. I was exposed to pornography somewhere around 2nd grade. In that same season of elementary school, I was molested by somebody that was 6 years older than me. By middle school, I was experimenting with homosexual behavior because I had a friend who was also molested and exposed to homosexual behavior. All the while, our parents didn't know, our church didn't know. And so for years, I was able to freely develop habit, a pattern that deeply affected me as I got into puberty and began making more and more poor sexual decisions because of the lack of self-control that was developed in me, but also the lack of insight and education that was given to me. So why in the world are we talking about this in the church? Because nobody ever did to me. And for years, I had to live in bondage. And I had to live full of shame and guilt. And I don't want to see that for the students of this church or this city. And so I'm passionate about this topic because I've been hurt deeply because of it. One of the questions that I'm going to launch from as we get into this is why? Well, two questions. Big picture, over the next 25 minutes or so, I'm going to cover how one's sexuality is developed. We're going to take a look at all the different facets that come together to develop one's sexuality. But one of the big questions that I just threw on the paper and began to wrestle with myself as I got into just talking about this topic fresh. I shouldn't say everybody, but oftentimes we can feel very concerned or overwhelmed at the idea of how do I talk to my kids about sex? How do I even broach this topic? What should I say? How should I say it? There's so many questions that can feel overwhelming. And so I just began to write down the answer, my answer to the question of why in the world would someone want to wait to have sex until they're married? The easy answer in the church is, well, the Bible says so. And that's a good answer. It's a great answer. The Word of God tells us to do it. The wages of sin is death. The gift of God is eternal life. You're going to experience death. But how? What's the heart behind this command that God would give for us to wait until marriage to have sex? One man, one woman for life. And I began to jot down just some thoughts. Obviously, physical security. I mean, doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that STDs are skyrocketing. But what about emotional security? You send the message to your future spouse. You never have to worry about me comparing you to someone else. How about relational security? Sending the message to your spouse that you never have to worry when we're away from each other that I'm going to be unfaithful to you. I've learned to control and be a good steward of the sexuality that God's entrusted to me. What about the divorce rate? That statistically speaking is actually higher for those who have sex before marriage. If you value the marriage, if you love this person, why would you put them in a situation that ultimately would push them towards potential divorce in the future? Here's another interesting fact that I point out to couples that I'm doing pre-marriage counseling with. There's actually more sexual fulfillment reported from couples that wait until marriage to have sex than those who don't. And I won't even get into all the research behind that. So why is it? And why it's so important to have answers to this question is students want to know why. Why would God put that command on paper? And to be able to really explain the heart of what God's trying to lead us towards. And all the evidence that just simply supports the Word of God as being truth and life and peace. So what I want to just run you through is a little bit of a framework for how a student's sexuality is developed. And Pastor James has always taught us that we consist of body, soul, and spirit. We have a body. We also have a soul. The soul is our mind, our will, our emotions. We also have a spirit. There's 3 elements to us. And oftentimes, we start and we just focus on the body. And while that's part of the sexual experience, sex is not just physical. It's emotional, it's spiritual. There's so much that happens through this beautiful union that God has given his creation. But we need to understand that biology is part of our sexual formation, that God, in Genesis 2, he made them male and female. He gave us different organs. A resource I would point you towards, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to be able to go into depth on all of this, but a great resource to look into, Focus on the Family, has wonderful articles about how and when to begin discussing different phases, and it starts with just biology. Here are boy parts, here are the girl parts. It starts there. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. Hormones. Hormones are a huge part of a student's sexual development. A teenager during puberty, their hormones will increase up to 700% during puberty. Their brains, at this same time that testosterone is raging, estrogen's raging, emotions are all over the place, their brains are not fully formed. So all of these hormones are raging through their body, and yet they don't have the self-control that's developed over the course of life to manage a lot of times the hormones. And that's where, as parents, we come in and help them learn self-discipline early on so that they can ultimately manage these great emotions when they hit during the puberty years. The other thing that will happen with hormones is during the prenatal time that the baby's in the womb, these hormones wash over your child. And a different temperament is developed within that kid because of that wash of hormones that happens. And I'm going to talk about temperament when we get to the soul section. But it's to understand that when you're explaining sexuality to students, that God has masterfully, Ephesians 2:10 says this, it's masterfully created. Where Psalm 139 says that we are wonderfully complex. God knit us together in the womb in such a perfect, complex way. We're not mistakes. Everything about us is on purpose. And so to connect this biological truth to your students that, man, you weren't a mistake, that these hormones that God washed over you while you were in my womb, while you were in your mother's womb, they're from God, and they are creating a disposition in you that while it may be different, it is wonderfully complex. It is masterfully made by your Creator. And don't even get me started about getting into the importance of God creating us and how that truth in and of itself, that we're created by God wonderfully, how much peace that brings to a student that can look in the Bible and go, no, you're not a mistake. No. You're not acting, you don't have the wrong disposition. You are beautifully made by God. You didn't just evolve. God has a plan for you. So hormones is part of it. Then your neurology. So neuroscience is fascinating because what we find and what we understand about neuroscience, going back to why wait to be exposed to sexual things until marriage. There are these things called feel-good hormones. It's like cortisol and dopamine, and there's these feel-good hormones that rage through us. There's these endorphins that get released where it's like, whoa, that felt good. We eat sugar. It's like, oh, that feels great. Or someone has an orgasm. Yes, I just said orgasm. It's okay. That happens, and the brain goes, yes, give me some more of that. I like that. I want more. It's the same high that happens. They literally equate a pornography addiction is the equivalent of a cocaine addiction. Psychologists have done the research on this, and there's actually a whole movement right now exposing how pornography is just as addictive as cocaine. They're calling it fight the new drug. Neuroscience has taught us that what happens, I have some woods off to the side of our house, and in the woods, especially in the winter, you can see where the deer walk through the woods. You can kind of see their real small, narrow path. So when we make decisions in response to an event or stimulus, we make decisions, and our brain begins to develop a habit in response to that stimulus. And so it starts as a deer path. It starts as this, kind of little path where it's not easy to walk through. But the more that you walk through that path, the more you break off some twigs. You clear out some trees. And then it gets to the point where someone who has a full-blown sexual addiction, they're on a highway. They see something, they hear something, they feel something, and boom, they're there before they know it. And that's how addictions get formed. So you want to stop the addiction and you want to deal with the bad neurology early on, at first exposure, or early on as a student begins to experiment, and to educate them that the more that you make this choice, the harder it's going to be able to break out of this poor sexual behavior and ultimately experience God's design for your life. This is why it's so vital as we talk about sexual identity or transsexuality or being non-binary or being a biological male but choosing to be a female. All these decisions, there's being pressure right now on students to make these decisions before the brain is even fully formed and can't comprehend the long-term consequences of the decisions that they're making right now. Neurology is part of it, understanding hormones. So all this is just simply understanding God's design for the body. But now the next question I want to get into is our soul. In our soul, what's the role that parents, guardians, you in this room, the peers, the public play on sexual development? Our soul consists of our mind, our will, and our emotions. So it was, I'm blanking on his name right now, but psychologists have done research. They've essentially identified that people's brains, psychologically, they look and they crave acceptance, security, worth, and purpose. It's our four greatest needs. You look all throughout the Bible, God is constantly speaking to these four greatest needs that he has placed in us. We crave purpose, we crave acceptance, we crave security, we crave to know that we're worth something. All of this goes back to the soul, the mind, the will, and the emotions, and what we put in our mind, what we allow into our emotions and our heart, and how we ultimately use the heart. So for us in this room, the culture and environment plays a huge role on what students are going to begin to believe about their sexuality. And there's a lot going on right now. So parents, guardians, statistically speaking, you are the number one determining factor as to what will happen in regards to your student's sexuality. I will take it a step further. I am so thankful that there's some dads in this room. It's so encouraging to me that there are dads in this room. Statistically speaking, your voice is louder than any other voice in their lives. Whether you feel it, believe it, see it or not, your voice to your kids matters, especially if they're from 5 to 12. That season of life, dads, you are depositing identity into your kids. You are speaking identity into them. Up till 5, it's a nurturing phase primarily. Mom is doing a lot of nurturing, providing a lot of security, reinforcing that they're safe, that it's okay to take risks. They're providing that nurture and helping cultivate the gifts that God's placed in your kids. But at 5 to 12, the kids really begin to look and lean towards dad for identity, for security, for acceptance, for purpose. Especially young boys. They want to be invited along with dad on an adventure. They want dad to look at them and speak life into them, tell them that they're proud of them. They're craving that affection. Young ladies, young men, they're both craving that affection. And so dads, your role is huge. And dads, one of the things that begins to happen during this season, especially as your daughters get into the teen years, is there can be some turbulence. There can be a little emotional volatility. But what daughters are looking for in their dads is security. Can he be a rock for me? Can he be a place of refuge for me? And it's vital that as dads, and I have 3 daughters, it's as vital as dads that we represent the security and the safety of God to the daughters. Love languages, just a note on this. as parents, you're going to have to pursue your kids. And it's all about how your kids perceive your love for them. I know you love them. I know you care about your kids. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. But your kids don't know that. Your kids are wondering every day. They're wondering, do they love me? Am I good enough? They're looking for that affection. And what we understand about love language is some of our kids, they need touch. They just want out. Some of our kids need gifts. Some of our kids need words. Some need time. And some want them to do things for you. Or they want you to do things for them. They want you to serve them. That's kind of probably natural for all of us, serving our kids a lot. But it's all about how the kids perceive that love language. And Pastor James, as he's taught on parenting, anytime you begin, and you can feel it when your kids are leaning out. Anytime your kids begin to lean out, you can kind of feel this disconnect. It's a trigger, it's a reminder of I've got to lean in and I've got to pursue them and I got to win their heart back because their heart's getting pulled in the other direction. And I want their heart. More than anything else, I want their heart, I want their ear, I want relationship with them so that I can be the one, I can be the voice that's louder than the environment around them, which leads me to peers. Primarily, your students are spending, pre-COVID, they were spending 6-7 hours a day at school. And I read one statistic on parenting that I believe it was the average student spends somewhere around 3 minutes of quality time, face-to-face, interacting with a parent a day. You begin to think how much time they're hearing from peers on a day-to-day basis versus how much time they're actually hearing from us as parents. So, understanding that during puberty, students are becoming hyper-aware. How do other people look? What are they wearing? How do I compare to them? How does my body compare to theirs? How are people responding to them versus me? What are they good at? What am I good at? Am I better than them? Am I good enough? There's so many insecurities, and we all know the hyper-comparison culture, before social media was crazy, we can all remember the days of walking through middle school and high school and being constantly worried of what are other people thinking about me. And now they can't escape it because they go home and they're still connected to school and their peers on social media, having to see all the comparison that's going on, never feeling like they quite measure up. The peers, they will play a vital role in this, and unless they're being filled up with acceptance, security, purpose, and worth by the family, they're going to begin to lean towards the peers. And so the question is, who are our kids hanging out with? And what do they believe? And are they supporting the same beliefs that you have as parents? It's the importance of knowing their friends. The public will deeply affect our soul. And it's not too hard to see the public's perception of sexuality as communicated everywhere. I mean, you can't drive down the highway without a message of sexuality that's being thrown at you. You turn on any show, I mean, it just seems like it's everywhere that these sexual messages are being thrown at our students. And on top of that, there's a whole new wave of TV shows that are promoting all kinds of sexual behavior, all kinds of sexual beliefs. And here's what I'm saying. Psychologists are now saying that in big cities like New York, like LA, that it's actually a social contagion. They're using the word it's a social contagion because it's now more popular to have questions about your sexuality than it is to be straight. If you're straight, you're actually now being more ostracized in bigger cities. So when I say in bigger cities, because we have somewhere from 2 to 3 years before that's us. We typically socially trend about 3 years behind major cities. So this is coming. And this pressure is going to become coming against your students. So just a word on screen time about that. The average screen time is now 7 hours a day. And you need to know and understand what your students are being exposed to. I'm all about setting limits, having restrictions on screens. More than likely, everybody in here is doing that. But I can't emphasize enough the importance of limiting your students' access and limiting the amount of time that they're having that access to screen time and knowing what they're being shown. Also, I'd encourage you to know the sex education that is in your school, whether your kids are homeschooled, public school, wherever they are. Make sure that you know and you look through actually what that school is teaching in terms of sex education. And because there's districts in this community that are teaching some things that definitely don't line up with a biblical worldview, if that makes sense. So let me touch on, temperament, because temperament will affect the soul. I talked on the hormonal wash and how students they'll have a certain temperament. I was a rough and tough guy growing up. I was the boy that wanted to go beat something up, shoot something, hit something. I mean, I played football. I love to do guy stuff, okay? But some boys are born into a disposition where they're more creative. They're more emotionally in tune. They aren't into competition-type sports. The idea of roughing around doesn't really excite them. One of the things our culture is horrible about still is sending a message that you have to be a certain type in order to be a man. And so what a young boy will do as they're growing up, if they aren't receiving the message that you're special, you're valued, you're accepted, God made you this way for a unique purpose and gift. If they aren't hearing that message, then what they'll begin hearing internally is, you don't fit with this group, but this gay group over here, you fit there. They're creatives, not to stereotype, but you know what? You fit a lot better with the theater guys, with the choir guys, than you do with the football guys. And then on top of that, culture is very quick now to go, well, hey, you're just gay. Why don't you just come out already? It's okay, just come out, just tell everybody you're gay, stop denying it. And there's this pressure that's going on with these young men that are maybe more artistic and expressive, and they don't see where they fit. And they don't have a voice that's louder than culture's voice. On the flip side, the same thing's happening to the girls that, by and large, there's the girly girls that paint their nails and do their hair and like to, play with Barbies when they're young. But there's a whole other category of girls that are going, I want to go get muddy and play with trucks and wear jeans and I don't like skirts. Well, then they grow up and culture tells them, well, if you don't have Kim Kardashian's booty and you don't, have a certain type and your figure is not like this, then you don't fit over here. And so the girls begin to lean over here and go, well, man, this group of lesbians, they accept me. I feel connected to them. They like to talk to me. So the temperament, they need a voice to help understand, why did God create you this way? Because the reality is, some of these young ladies, maybe God did give them that disposition so that they could be leaders of and CEOs of companies or be lawyers or be in these positions where they're strong vocal leaders and they aren't intimidated by challenges. And that's why God designed them that way. But they need a voice that speaks that into existence. And so that's where it's important to understand temperament. The final thing that will affect a student's soul deeply, and I already mentioned this, events. Traumatic events, events of neglect, early exposure to pornography. Many of the things I experienced, abuse. The average exposure to pornography is now 8. 1/4 of girls will be molested. 1 out of 4 girls, statistically, will be molested. 1 out of 4 boys statistically will be molested. And I believe that that statistic is actually higher, and because of the shame and the embarrassment that many men hold, they aren't talking about it. From my experience in this church, I'm going to say this strongly. From my experience in this church, I believe wholeheartedly that statistic is higher. I believe wholeheartedly that there are boys in this church that are experimenting with each other, not just because of my experience, but just because of what I found out from men in their 20s that I'm working with, that this is happening, and nobody knows about it, and they're not talking about it. 80% who struggle, now listen to this statistic, 80% who struggle sexually report having some form of childhood sexual abuse. So here's where I get really frustrated with the current dialogue and culture that, well, we need to let students, choose their gender identity because if they don't, they won't feel accepted and they'll commit suicide. I believe actually the opposite's true. I believe that people that are struggling with transsexuality and gender dysphoria, they're committing suicide because they're not getting the right help. And they're not getting the proper care. Because more than likely, I wholeheartedly believe that someone who is struggling with sexual confusion, they actually had some unresolved abuse and trauma in their childhood that they haven't been able to deal with, and they've been misdiagnosed, and they need healing. But a student needs healing from early exposure to pornography. I wish somebody would have told me what to do with those images that were in my head as a second grader. I wish somebody would have told me what to do with this molestation I experienced. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where to go with it. And so this event begins a habit and a cycle, and ultimately you're entrenched in an addiction, and as a kid you don't know how to get out. And that's where, as parents, you've got to front load your kids to where if they are exposed, if they do get molested, they need to know where to go and what to do. And one of the talking points I heard that has always stuck with me, so another name that I'd throw out to you, there's a gentleman named Sy Rogers, S-Y Rogers. He was a day away from transitioning from a male to a female. Holy Spirit showed up in his room, radically changed his life, and he spent the next 30-some years of his life teaching and preaching about sexuality. Much of what I've learned from him. So one of the things that Sy said, over and over again is, often we'll use the terminology with our kids, don't you ever let somebody touch your body. Nobody should ever touch your body. Right? And so what he talks about happens in victims that have been molested is they say, well, that happened, and then I was so full of guilt and shame that I didn't want to tell my parents because I knew I'd disappoint them. And the reality is that poor little boy and girl, they had no power. They couldn't stop them. So the wording is, hey, if anyone ever touches your body or harms you, just come tell mom and dad so we can help you get through that. Let us help you through that. Hey, if you ever see an image of somebody naked, if something like that ever pops up on your phone, would you come tell mommy and daddy, because we want to help you with that. That's not a good picture. And obviously that's maybe a younger conversation, but the key is they need to know what to do when they're hit with this trauma. The other thing I point out is more than likely if a student, well, I shouldn't say more than likely, that student, if they're traumatized, if they're victimized, they're going to need counseling. They're going to need professional counseling. And there's no shame in that. So get them the help they need. Final area is the spirit. Let me just go through this real quick, because in the spirit realm, there's our human nature that students need to understand. Their sin has consequences. They also need to understand that what they feed is going to grow. We reap what we sow. So if they don't understand how to control the sinful nature or the flesh in them, and master the sin that's trying to take them out, if they aren't learning self-discipline, self-control, if they aren't learning how to renew their mind, take thoughts captive, then their human nature is going to become stronger than their spirit nature. So they need discipled in this tactic so that their spirit can grow stronger than their flesh. What we miss in terms of the sexual conversation is that at the heart of sexual addiction is a cry for acceptance, security, worth, purpose. This starts in a small, innocent way in students. So this starts with something like binging video games. Students get stuck in this comatose state of taking in to make themselves feel better. Remember the neuroscience? I'm doing this because it makes me feel better. And then, instead of dealing with the sense of worthlessness that I have, or the purposelessness that I have, or the lack of acceptance that I feel, instead of really dealing with these hard issues, I'm going to eat these Oreos because they make me feel really good. I'm going to binge watch this Netflix show because it makes me not think about the fact that I don't look like these other girls. So at the heart of all of this, it goes back to these seemingly innocent patterns that students need discipled through. So we've got to train them what to do with their fleshly urges and cravings in non-sexual ways so that when they get hit with a sexual temptation, they know how to overcome it. Second thing you see is generational sin. Nowhere in my family legacy is there a marriage that has gone and fulfilled its covenant. Generational sin. You look at David, you look at Solomon with his 1,000+ concubines, and then you look at Absalom and the mess that he had. The generational sin, here's the way we say it: what you tolerate, your kids will abuse. So if you don't want it in your house, you need to deal with it. And I wish I could say it some other way and sugarcoat it, but if you are allowing it in your life, you better believe your kids are getting hit with it at least twice as hard. And I can anecdotally, I know 3 generations in this church. I know what the dad is struggling with. I know what the kid is struggling with. Like, I can see this across our church at Victory Life. So it's the generational sin. It's saying, hey, no more for me in my house. I'm dealing with this so my kids don't have to. And you're going to pass on blessings to your kids. Final thing is spiritual warfare. At the heart of sexual perversion, what we miss is that there is a spirit of perversion. And the spirit of perversion, what it does is it twists and distorts the truth. And oftentimes, students don't see that spiritual tactic. They don't see at the heart of the spiritual attack in their sexuality is actually a spirit of lust. And the spirit of lust, the message it sends is, if you have this, then you'll be happy. How much of that do we have in culture? Finally, there's a spirit of prostitution. Yes, I just said prostitution because it's real. But all throughout the Old Testament, the Israelites didn't prostitute themselves sexually. They prostituted themselves to false idols. So how many people in the United States of America are giving themselves to something in order to get something they want? It's a give-to-get mentality. Students need taught and equipped to identify these patterns early on so that they don't succumb to that trick and that tactic, that scheme of the enemy as they get enraged with 700% thrust of hormones pulsing through their underformed brain. Does that make sense? So we've got to attack all these fronts. I know that was a lot to take on, and probably a lot more than I hope that was valuable for you. Here's what I want to do. Up on the screen, there is a way that you can send me questions, and there's going to be a way that you can text in, or that's the survey. So I want the poll everywhere. So you can actually text me or send me in questions. You're going to have to hop on your web browser, and you're going to have to go to pollev.org. I believe it is. You guys have that slide back there? 1 minute? Okay. And then pulev.org/Justin Smelty 065. Yeah, pulev.com/Justin Smelty 065. And you'll have a chance to shoot me questions about sexuality, and whatever question you pop in will populate it right there. And I want to encourage you to shoot your questions to me right now, and I'll answer them real time. These are completely anonymous, and I want to answer as many of these can in the next 15 minutes or so that I can. But I'd love to just hear from you, and what I've found is instead of the embarrassment of, hey, my kid's masturbating, what do I do? Having to ask a question like that in public, I'd be happy to answer that question real time if that is going on. More than likely it is, sorry. But again, it's proactive communication with your students. So there's that. I'm hoping Pastor Tim is going to throw a question my way and, get me off the standing up here. So you're asking how to send something in? Can you guys access it back there? Oh, man, technology. Yeah. Abby and I were just having this conversation. You said your girls are 12 and 13? I'm going to pull my computer out here. I might be able to get this working on the fly. This was working when I walked up here. So, Pastor James, one of the things that he swears by is Coke runs. So one of the things he'll talk about is getting your kids in a situation where they don't have to look at you eye to eye, and just throwing the question out, so, what kind of questions do you have about sex? And just kind of seeing, okay, what are they wondering about? What are they trying to figure out? And then from there, beginning to integrate some of the things that we were just talking about. And talking about, okay, here's how God designed you. Asking them questions like, do you know what God says about your sexuality? Do you understand how God made you unique? Can I tell you some things that I see about you that are really unique or special to God, and special about your sexuality, special about the way that God made you? The other thing I'd say, don't underestimate the power of prayer, of just praying through what does my kid need to hear right now. But really, it's not just a one-time talk as much as it is an ongoing dialogue of just looping back around to that conversation as the Holy Spirit prompts you, or as you feel like, oh, it's time to have this conversation and talk a little bit more in depth of why it's valuable to wait until marriage to have sex, or why we dress modestly, or some of those conversations. So, guys, do you have any idea why this is not working? Why this changed all of a sudden on me? So, I know. So bad. Oh. I don't understand.
Said it's waiting for you to start it.
I know. And it was started when I walked up here. We are live. I don't know how it happened, but it happened and we got it fixed. So, whew! Shoot them in. Fire away. Here we go.
Can I ask you something that's hard to type out?
Yeah.
So I work as a behavior interventionist in a middle school. So I talk to kids on a daily basis, so I kind of know where they are. And where I'm at, it's one of those things where it's almost popular to have sexual identity questions.
Yeah, so you're starting to see the beginnings of it. Yep.
So, but having a daughter that's also in that same school, I'm trying to find the line where I'm to love people for who they are, but yet to be careful,
Yep.
because I'm seeing her kind of hanging out and talking to some of the kids that I meet with on a weekly basis. I don't want to share stuff with her, obviously, because I'm talked to confidentially. So,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to figure out how I guide her in loving people, but yet being careful of who she's around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love that question because we don't want to hide our light under a bushel,
Right.
so to speak, as believers. Yeah, thank you. He's asking, my daughter hangs around people that have sexual identity questions and they're struggling. How do I equip my daughter to be influential in that situation and not be influenced by it? And this is just beyond sexual issues. I think this applies to any situation your kids are in with their friends. The question is, do they share the values that you share? Are they pushing you closer to Christ or drawing you away? And I think these are questions that you just kind of ask and dialogue with your kids about. Hey, what do you know about their values? What do they believe? Have you talked with them about God at all? Have you talked to them or invited them to come to church or Impact with you? And all of a sudden, those kind of questions expose, are they influencing you or are you influencing them? Because if the goal truly is for you to influence them, then first off, I would argue that they probably aren't actually friends. What you're trying to do is be a witness to them. Because friends share mutual values and they share a mutual trust. And so just teaching students that friendship it's mutual self-sacrifice, it's mutual respect, and can you really have a strong friendship if you don't have the same definition of something like love? And friendship in and of itself goes back to that core desire of students of being accepted, and if I don't have friends or if I'm not liked by these people, I'll feel rejected. So there's so many other heart issues that are down there that I think to really help students see why you have questions about them hanging out with those people. And then, man, it's okay for you to be the bad guy. It's okay for you as parents to go, yeah, you know what? you're not going to go over to their house because I don't feel good about that. They can come over here. I'd love to have them over here, but I just don't feel good about you going over there. So, all right, we got a question in. Should we as parents ask our child, do you like boys or girls? Should we ask this periodically? That's a good question. Let me take a step back. Every 3 years, I rotate through teaching sexuality, teaching about sexual integrity, which is actually different than sexuality, and then teaching dating. At the heart of this question, there's actually a dating question. Again, on the front end of some of these questions, you want to prep your students of what to do with attraction. Song of Solomon says, don't awaken love until it so desires. Proverbs tells us to guard our heart, for it's a wellspring of life. So teaching your students what to do when they begin feeling attracted to people in general is important. To go, okay, so I'm feeling drawn to this person. What is it about this person that I'm feeling drawn to? Why am I attracted to them? So I don't necessarily think it's a question of should I be asking, do you like boys or girls, as much as, hey, is there anybody that's catching your eye? Is there anybody you're finding yourself feeling attracted to? I think that's perfectly good dialogue I would hope that you can have with your kids. I'll ask that to some of the young guys I work with around here and just kind of see what response they get. And some of them will get like, oh, I don't like girls, you know. But I think that's just part of the ongoing dialogue of just talking about what's going on in your heart. What are you thinking about? All that good stuff. So I'll answer this one. And you guys can vote these up or down with the thumbs up or thumbs down. It's not like you don't like that one. It's just that you want to get that one answered next. So if there's a question on this list where you're going, oh, I really hope he gets to that one, definitely talk about that. So we've got a vote for, is it better for the moms to talk with daughters and fathers with sons regarding sex? I think both the parents really need to be involved in different ways, because there's parts of this conversation that, you know what, as a man, I probably can't talk about or fully understand, but I can try to, and I can try to enter into my daughter's world, and vice versa. And I think the heart is, as parents, you want to enter into their world and try to speak into some of the lies that they're believing. Try to catch some of the things that they're seeing or believing about themselves that just aren't true. So in terms of who to have the talk, it might be easier for mom to have the talk, you know, to introduce the topic with your daughters and dad to introduce the topic with the boys. But everything the research is saying is that you dads, you're a strong voice in their life. A lot of the research is saying you're actually a stronger voice. And I mean, biblically speaking, this is not true, but your voice really matters. So don't discount that. And again, there's a lot of research that I wasn't able to get into, and that's a category that Pastor Tim and I are actually dialoguing about in the future, offering a class of like, how do we have some of these conversations with kids at all ages, right? Yeah, we're literally just talking about this last week, so that's good. Oh, good. How do you approach the topic of masturbation? Good. Glad we got that one on the board. So, gosh, how do I answer this one in a couple minutes? I'm having a flashback to so my parents found porn underneath my bed as a middle schooler, right? And my dad goes, you know, son, there's a difference between having sex and making love, and that's not good. like, Dad, I appreciate you saying something. That was a good start. I really thank you for at least acknowledging that I was not doing something right. So going back to the grid, helping students understand, hey, is this who God called you to be? Bringing everything back to the relationship with Christ. Navigating every conversation that you have with your students through that lens of, at the end of the day, my goal is to help them hear God's voice and to get them connected to Christ. That is the end goal. If they do that, all this other stuff can fall into line. I am a living testimony of that. I found Christ. I was radically saved. God changed my life. The end goal, get them connected to Christ. So, talking about masturbation, well, now you get that connected back to the neurology of why that's not a really good, responsible sexual behavior to begin gratifying. You get back to the goal of why wait until you're married to have sex. What's the end goal that you want to experience when you're married? Do you want to experience sexual fulfillment? Because if that's what you want, statistics and research show that's not actually going to help. Just trying to educate them of how that decision to gratify the sinful nature, as Galatians talks about, I believe, gratifying the sinful nature, it's going to lead to death. Lust is never satisfied. That's what Proverbs tells us. It's going to lead you down to the grave. And there are men that have literally lost their jobs because they were looking at porn at work and they couldn't control their pornography addiction. So just helping paint that picture for young men is huge. Helping them see the long-term consequences of something that seems so innocent as a kid, of learning self-control, learning to control the urges of your body. Why is that important? Is it honoring to the image that you're looking at? And here's the other thing that I'll get real raw with some of the guys in their 18 to 20s, and I'll go, is sex trafficking wrong? Is it wrong to sex traffic? Is it wrong to hold people in slavery and use them to gratify your sexual desires? Well, the majority of people would go, yeah. Okay, so is it wrong to hold somebody in your brain and use them to gratify your sexual desires? And it's like the light bulb goes off. And I'm that strong with them. And they see it. Not to mention all the research that's associated with pornography actually being a gateway drug into sex abuse and sex trafficking. So, all that to say, how do you have the masturbation conversation? I think it's a lot bigger than masturbation, and people need to see that. So, I want to be respectful of your guys' time. I really appreciate you coming. I'm honored that you trust me with your kids. I want to have a continued dialogue with you. We have a survey that I'd love to have you fill out for me and give me a little bit of feedback of how I could best serve you. If you have more questions, if you want to get a hold of me, call the church, shoot me an email if you want, jsmelter@victorylifebc.com. I'd love to talk with you more. I'd love to meet with you if you want to just spend a little bit more time talking one-on-one about some of these issues. But however I can serve your families and equip your families, this is a passion of mine. And I really believe, as I said in the announcement, or the announcements that went out to the church, culture is talking about this issue. And as the church, our voice needs to be louder because our narrative is actually life-giving and is actually going to lead students to life to the full. And that's what we want for them. So let me pray for you. Let me pray for the students. God, bless these parents. Fill them with joy. And right now, I speak to any guilt or shame or condemnation, and I say, get off them in Jesus' name. And I pray each of these parents hear and believe in their hearts you say, you are wonderful parents. You are more than conquerors. You have what it takes. You're overcomers. Nothing can separate you from my love. I pray each of these parents would believe that they have been chosen by God, that they have been gifted by God to lead this generation, to lead their kids. Equip and empower them with wisdom and everything they need to bless and love their kids. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're taking a little break. The students are going to get in here in about 8 minutes. You are welcome to stay for worship, stay for the message I'm going to share with them, and then we'll be dismissed by 8:30 later on. We've got some more snacks back there if you want them, and I'll be around for a little bit. Pastor Tim. Oh, yeah, 94,000. Text Impact Parent to 94,000. And you'll get a response back with the survey link, and I would love to have you fill that out. 4 questions. I'm just trying to get some more feedback from you of how I can better serve you. And again, here for you. Love you guys. Thank you for being here.